I feel like this episode is going to feel like a bit of a turning point for the show, potentially, because thus far the series has been very episodic in nature. The way that it's done its storytelling, it's been very episode by episode, with a lot of focus on things that are happening moment to moment. It's been like again very monster of the week, very specifically like monster of the week and dish of the week, as I've kind of joked before. And last two episodes were a bit different in the sense that the Undyne carried over across both episodes, and then also we got more some more very direct discussions and topics related to the rescue mission to save Fallen, right? We got 2 episodes ago the flashback of Fallen and Marcial from their school days, and then last episode we met Namari, who is one of the characters who left after what happened to Fallen. So, and then going into this episode as well, if I'm remembering correctly, Chilchuck said that we are about to enter the floor that the Red Dragon is on. So, just a lot of things make me feel like we are about to get into a section of the story that is going to be much more focused on the connectivity of things. It's going to be a bit less silly goofs that are going to be, changing up from one week to the next, one episode to the next, and a bit more focused on like a broader narrative and kind of overarching story and characters and yada yada yada. So, yeah, that is something that I am very interested to see just because in its episodic nature thus far, we have seen some very good things that make me feel as though once we get to bigger, broader things, they are going to be handled very well. And so, quite simply, that makes me excited to see whether or not they live up to my expectations. So, with all that being said, let's go ahead and get into episode 10, 9, 10, 10. There's like one episode disparity between this and Freer, and I sometimes forget which episode. Anyways, episode 10 of Dungeon Meshi, starting in 3, 2, 1, go. Don't mind me. I definitely didn't forget to route the audio through to my headphones before I started the episode. That definitely was not a thing that happened. Oh, geez. I am a bit of a mess at the moment, more so than usual. uh, we didn't have any. We didn't have any videos uploaded last week because I've just been things have been rough again, more so than usual, and so uh, trying to get back into doing this because I don't know. I mean I like making these videos, and so even though I'm a bit tired, bit out of it compared to normal, I'm hoping that we can have some fun with doing some recording again. So yeah, and you can help me. Shameless plug. You can help me by giving me your energy, by liking the video, by commenting on the video, by watching the video all the way through to the end, even if you think that my rambling after the episode is nonsense. All right, cool. I stalled my way through the OP. All right. Now let's see what's actually happening in this episode. Um, I don't like how uncertain we're starting things out. Have you not been here before? Oh no, okay, so I guess because they're pathing through the orc settlement. What am I looking at? It's a different way than they went previously. Yeah, it could just be a deterrent, natural deterrent of sorts. Ah, jeez. How terrifying. We've made some really good progress, guys. All right, take 5. Oh, his sword's acting up again. I'm sorry, what? He called out to the sword with the name that he gave it for. Ah! His sword! Oh, its head is fucking gone. Oh, and now so is her staff. How rude! Oh, her staff has a name too. I don't think we knew that. No, I'm pretty sure Senshi doesn't really care about his weapon based on how he was talking last episode. Point blank fireball, baby. Let's do it. Huh? Smack it with something. Eh. Los, please! Come on! Surely you had more to offer than that, no? I'm sorry, what are we doing right now? This is quite the careful strategy he's enacting right now, as we're just in a standstill with this toad, frog. One of the two. What? Ah! Chill truck! Why is it Angie? Oh. You sealed your own fate. Oh no, please get Chill Truck out of there. Oh, okay. I thought the frog was falling backwards into the abyss along with Kensuke and Ambrosia. Quick thinking. Oh no. They're gonna take that one step further, aren't they? Oh no. Okay, frog. It's froggy. Quero. It. And he's got more tentacles. Okay. I like how, I don't know if I've explicitly mentioned this before. Oh god, I hate that. I like how when Senshi's cooking, there's just like brief moments where you can see like the kind of like the kind of like intense muscle definition on his arms and his hands. Really cool. Oh dear. Bruh, she just came back from like basically the brink of death last episode. And you're already doing this to her. My poor girl, Marcial. Please no. Don't do it. She's dead inside. She is now just like, let's get this over with, please. And they're just eating as they go. The ridiculous faces. I'm If there's nothing like super cool, I might have to use that as the thumbnail. That was such a silly little screenshot. Oh, wow. And this is a sudden change of pace, huh? Oh, yeah, no. This is quite. Can we take off the frog suits? Okay, we can take off the frog. Oh dear. No. uh, what is? Huh? I didn't know if we were going to be seeing these characters again. Is the fact that these twins, is the fact that we have these adventuring twins with like such similar names, there's no way that's like a reference to Vex and Vax from Critical Role, from Vox Machina, right? Surely not, right? I don't know. I'll say that bar got murdered. What do you mean, how? That was not on my bingo card. Backstory, lore being delivered from some rich noble, seemingly. We're getting like geopolitics from this guy. Huh? Immortality. You have my attention. I mean, you had it before. I'm very intent and focused right now. So this is interesting and all that, but I'm gonna be honest. I question the decision to have the vehicle of delivery for this information be these two characters. Because I don't fucking know this guy. And I don't care about this guy. In fact, I'm pretty sure I actively did not like him last episode, so you know. Oh my god, and now he's hating on our main group. And Chilchuk was the only one who he didn't have like a weird visual recollection of for some reason. Okay, so she is like now committed to this group. Speaking of lacking interest in characters, currently me for her as well. Temple? Hmm? This is going to be interesting. I have an idea of where we're going. Wow. Go get your eyes checked. Okay, never mind. This is not the direction I thought it was going. All right. So I get that's meant to show that she like cares, right? But it's just like a very it's a much more distant and like casual form of care. Nonetheless, it helps to inform a bit more about her character. More bread. I mean, he makes a fair point. I don't know if the orcs will see it that way, but he makes a fair point. Oh, this looks good. This looks promising. Wait, what? I mean, that part I gathered, but what did he just call them? Oh, I don't think we. Wait a second. How did they get their frog suits off? Did I miss something? She's having doubts. My girl is on the verge of a panic attack. Yeah, Chilchuk's like, hold on. I clarify that I would not be fighting. Explosion! Pog. How does that strategy change when you're missing those two now? Oh, I said two, but Fallon's protection magic is also probably pretty impactful. Inverse scale? Okay. I swear to God, if they look over there and they see the dragon. Oh, that was a transition. A lot of strategizing happening now. Wait, this dungeon has gravity physics? How lame. Good question. That didn't seem very confident. Now that's strategy. Okay. Now we're thinking. Now we're thinking. Just make sure that y'all have eaten and are rested and have the energy so that you yourselves are not tired out like the last time. Yeah, adamant, right? Senshi is now being very guarded about his cooking equipment. Okay, I know I said at the outset of this episode of this video that I was expecting things to take a bit of a turn, different direction this episode, and it kind of has, but not in the ways that I was expecting. More bread. Thank you, Senchi. We'll be here. We go. Yep. Good meal is the most. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Indeed, you did. That. Oh, come on, Senchi. Don't leave me. Don't leave me in suspense. Ooh, we frying? We frying. I used to do this kind of thing with my dad with fish after we'd go fishing. I don't know if I've ever had fried frog legs, but I have had frog legs. Tastes like chicken, legitimately. Inspiring speech time? Probably not. It's Laos. He's a bit too awkward for that, I think. Oh, okay, that was actually pretty good. Talking about Senchi. What about? Okay. I, I like how Senchi and Chilchuck got like an appreciation, a bit of appreciation, And then from Arshila it was like, I'm sorry. Instead of it being like, you've done this or that for us, it was just like, look, I appreciate you being here. This is definitely like the most we've seen Laos in like a proper leadership role, right? And that's the episode. Yeah. Okay. All right. That was. I think I've definitely said this before with Dungeon Meshi episodes, but that was a bit of an odd episode. I feel. uh, trying to. I want to try to start remembering that I could take my headphones off after the episode is over, just to be a bit more comfortable during post-episode discussions. So yeah, that was. I called attention to it earlier after like probably like a minute or two straight of not saying anything. Um, this episode was it was a bit of a diversion from the norm, from what I think we've come to expect from this series in a couple of ways. But again, it was very much not in the way that I kind of expected. I expected things to change in a way that again was a little less episodic and a little more overarching in nature in some way or another. And we kind of got that, but the way that we got that was kind of I'll touch on kind of what happened second first in a way. Uh, with the group dynamics, we saw, I think, a bit more kind of coalescing around their goal. And as I mentioned at like the very end of the episode there, we saw Laos kind of stepping up into like he has kind of been in a sense the de facto leader in a way of the group, but I don't think we have too significantly or substantially seen him like actually taking on that role, like stepping into like the shoes of like actually being a leader. Some of that stuff may have been happening off screen, behind the scenes, in a way. That might be like why some of the other characters like are trusting of him and like do adventure with him. But I don't think we really saw too much of that front and center up to this point. But now in this episode, we're seeing like a very like intentional effort from Laos to be this kind of group leader, and that is just cool to see because again, it's while there was still definitely some silliness, especially at the beginning of the episode with the frogs and the not just the frogs themselves, but the frog suits. um, it's a bit more. It does kind of set us up for more serious character interactions going forward, right? Because if characters are just kind of goofy, wonky, silly, zany all the time, then you can't just suddenly shift gears and go into like, oh, and now we're gonna tackle something dark and serious, and there's gonna be weight to the situation at hand and like a present conversation. Like there have to be things, even if it's like small things, even if it's only on occasion, there have to be things that lead into that. And we've gotten a lot of those little touches, those little moments, I think, throughout the first several episodes to now make it like realistic and believable to see Laos presenting himself in this way. Like this didn't feel inauthentic, and it didn't feel forced to see Laos kind of stepping into this role in a way, even though it's in a way that we haven't necessarily seen from him thus far. It didn't feel it did feel, I believe at least, fairly organic in nature. And again, that just kind of helps to further solidify who he is as a character, what his role is, or at the very least, what he wants it to be among the group. And that informs, again, just how we're going to see different kinds of character interactions going forward within the group and also potentially between groups. Because, again, like, while our main focus has thus far in the show to the, in these first 10 episodes, it's obviously been Laos's group, right? The party of Laos, Chilchuk, Marcial, and Senshi, right? That's very obviously been our main group. But we've now seen there have been what about other groups been? We've seen two main other groups that haven't just been like one-off gags of seeing them. They've shown up twice, I believe, for both groups, if I'm not mistaken. We had Kabru's party, who again we saw them like getting prepared, and we saw some different kind of like mentalities and paradigms from them, and the way that they were talking to each other, and on the surface as they were again preparing for a journey into the dungeon. And then we saw them kind of in the dungeon making their way to lower floors. And then we saw them from, again, the perspective of our main group getting taken out or having already been taken out. And then we saw them a second time having been revived by some traveling healers. And they were like, oh, we're gonna go find the people who they felt robbed them. And then we got to see them again having already been dispatched by Laos's group. And so I think it's quite likely that we're going to see them again, so for a third time, and possibly beyond that. I don't know that, especially with Kabru being featured in the OP, it's entirely possible that he's going to be a relatively major player later on. So yeah, and then again, the second group of Namari's new traveling party, the what's his name? That old gnome that I don't care for, Tansu, I think, and then Kiki and Kaka. And so yeah, so we have the point of why was I talking about them? The point is that we have already established these other adventuring groups, so that it's not just we're not just building up the characters of Laos's party for the sake of inter-party interactions. It's also so that we can presumably eventually have their party with Laos as the leader then interacting with other groups, and then we might get potentially some very interesting interplay amongst various factions, which could be potentially very interesting. And speaking of broader things, speaking of factions, speaking of big groups and intergroup dynamics and all that, I was not expecting the lore dump again, the geopolitical lore dump of elves versus dwarves, and the land struggles that resulted from their conflict in a previous war, and how humans, they're Tallmen, I believe as they're called in this series, how they're staking, like the claim that they have staked over certain ownership rights to like property is like also like caught up in and then there's the like, are people vying for riches? Are they vying for just straight up land control and having that kind of domestic property for themselves, kind of like how the orcs were holed up in a certain area of one of the lower floors, and they were like making that just like their home. And then also, as Tansu was clearly more focused on and interested in, was the kind of magic that is hidden within the dungeon. So there was just like, again, I was expecting things to get a little bigger and broader this episode, but not like that, because those were definitely some big broad concepts, I think, that were broached in this episode. And but similar in a weird way, kind of similarly to how I was saying that Laos's newfound leadership, or at least attempted newfound leadership from this episode, didn't come out of nowhere. Similarly, these kind of struggles and conflicts between the races also didn't come out of nowhere. Because speaking back to the orcs that were we got to interact with in a previous episode, like we saw that there was conflict between how the orcs viewed their situation and how Marcial, as kind of again sort of a almost like a stand-in for elves as a race, saw their situation, and how there was like a very clear disconnect between like those two viewpoints, right? So yeah, I'm that's this is a topic that I think is I'm going to continue as certain things are talked about, like it was here. This topic is something that I think I'm going to continue to try to comment on, just in the sense of like keeping tabs and like keeping it and like making it known that like I am paying attention to this and trying to keep up with certain, aspects of the information that we are being presented. But I think that this is going to be something that I'm not going to have like necessarily super in-depth opinions on until we get more. Because again, this is something that like these are big topics, and sprinkling in random lore dumps of like a couple minutes here, between Tansu and again I assume he's some kind of noble, eating his fancy bread with butter and what seemed like lox or similar. uh, and between that and like again episodes back, the interactions with the orcs and our party, um, I feel like I feel like we're gonna need a few more scenes like that before we get to a point where I feel like, okay, I have these big statements to make about how I view the world as I see it from what we've been presented to this point. Does that make sense? Does that all make sense? Um, so yeah, and then now let's dial things back a little bit, just in terms of more small scale. But I talked initially about characterization stuff with Laos, and then moved on. I segued into bigger stuff, but now let's pull it back again to talk more at a lower slash smaller level, more individual level of characterization. Namari, we saw a little bit more of Namari this episode, and I'm still not like hugely a fan of her necessarily. I don't hate her. I wouldn't even say that I dislike her like I do her present employer. um, but we did see a little bit more of her. And real quick before I talk about what we did actually see from her, I want to talk about just I mentioned as we were going to the revival area. I don't remember what it was called. I don't remember if it was just considered a morgue or a crypt or whatever. But as they went to the temple, that's what it was. It was a temple. As they went to the temple, I was like, I was kind of like, as the conversation like started, I was like, hold on, wait a minute, let me see. I think I know where this is going. And then it turned out that she was asking basically if Fallon had shown up, or her body rather had shown up, and they were like, no, no, it has not. And then I was like, oh, that's not what I was expecting. So let me just real quick clarify what I thought was happening, and then we'll get into a little bit of just talking about like Namari herself and like again what was actually shown and what we actually got to see of her character. So what I thought was happening was, and in order to make this point kind of clear, I also need to touch on resurrection magic as a concept as it exists in this world, because magic systems are complex. At least unless it's at least as long as they're not being done super poorly, I think they're complex. I think that some magic systems are very simple and straightforward, but generally speaking, magic systems that are very simple and straightforward aren't terribly interesting oftentimes. um, so magic systems are oftentimes fairly complex, and in this world thus far, we haven't really been given a ton of concrete information about how the magic system works. And in particular, for the purposes of this conversation, especially, resurrection magic. We know that it exists, but we don't really know a lot about how it functions like at a practical level. If you know, does that make sense? That like do you immediately understand what I'm saying when I say that? Like we don't know, for instance, we don't know how difficult this magic is to perform. We don't know how draining it is on the magic practitioner. I think that it's probably safe to assume that resurrection magic is a fairly advanced magic. I just think that makes sense. But we don't necessarily know like how advanced it is. We don't know how rare people who can perform resurrection magic are among adventurers and magic practitioners. We don't know what condition the body is able to be in order for resurrection magic to be successful. We don't know how long a person can be deceased for before resurrection magic stops being usable on them. And we don't know necessarily how those things might be connected. Like, if somebody is dead for longer, does it then take more magic? Does it take a more powerful magic user in order to cast the resurrection spell to use that magic on them? We don't know at this point in time. I don't know. And what I am getting at is that in that temple that Namari was visiting, we don't know what kinds of bodies are in there. Are these people who died in the last day or two? Are these people who died in the last week? Are the people who have died in the past year? Are they just like everybody that have been collected to this point? Like, are they like after corpses are collected? Because we know that there's like this some form of corpse retrieval. Again, we don't know a lot of specifics and particulars about how that system works either. But we know that there is corpse retrieval. But is there some means of preserving the bodies until such time as they can be brought back? We know from what Tance was saying in the last episode that when people die in the dungeon, their soul is like connected to their body and can't leave. But that doesn't necessarily mean that like it doesn't necessarily tell us a lot about, again, like the condition of bodies and like how they can be affected by by external factors and how that affects the potential for them to be healed and brought back. And so all of this, you might have forgotten by now what the hell the point was I was trying to make and why I'm talking about this. So let me try to bring it back. All of this is to say the initial thought that I was having when we entered this temple was Namari comes here often. I think that it even seemed like the person who was stationed at the temple recognized her, which, they kind of mention, and I'm not sure to what extent it is or is not super accurate. But they kind of mentioned in the last episode that like there's not a lot of adventurers. It's like a pretty small circle of people who become adventurers, right? And so a lot of people know each other. So maybe it's just as simple as like this guy knows a lot of the adventurers because at one point in time or another they come through the temple, or he interacts with them like in a market or similar. So, or guild hall, those kinds of things. So maybe it's that. But the way that I was reading that scene initially was that Namari comes here often. And I immediately connected this to her money troubles. Because as we saw when Kaburu's team was being revived, and I think also as you can kind of just fairly assume, like, a lot of this healing and resurrection doesn't happen for free. It costs money. And one of the few things we knew about Namari is that she has money problems. She has money troubles. She is not financially secure. It is, in theory, why she left Laos's party after the event with Fallen and the Red Dragon. It is why she chose the job that she did with Tance. It is why she refused to then leave Tance's party to assist Laos's party, even after Marcial basically begged her to do so because they needed as much help as they could get from her perspective in order to have a better shot at, rescuing, saving Fallen. So that was where, we know that she has money troubles. This is one of the few things we know about her character after having been introduced to her only last episode. So when we go into the temple, we don't know immediately why she's there necessarily. You could have assumed that she was there looking for Paul, and I'm sure that some people made that immediate assumption as it was happening, but we don't know that that's why she's there. All we know is that she is in the temple to ask about some corpse, right? And so the assumption that I made was that again this that again was that these things are connected, and that something happened in her past, some sort of event where a lot of people died. I don't know how many people. I don't know how they died. I don't know. I didn't have. I wasn't trying to put together ideas of what specifically happened, but I was looking at it as she was one of the few or possibly sole survivor of some sort of tragedy. And that rather than let that be something that just sort of defined who she was going forward, she got stuck on it. She fixated on it. And she made it her goal to bring back the other people who were connected to that, the victims who were not lucky enough to survive like she did. That was kind of where I was going with that. Is I thought that she was going there because it was a I thought it was a like repeat thing that she did, to where she did jobs, got money, immediately went to the temple to pay for somebody to be resurrected. That was kind of where I was going with that, with my read on that situation. And clearly, that was not what was actually happening. Once the scene played out the way that it did, we saw that she was just there checking on Fallen, and that does, provide characterization for her, but it's not the direction I thought they were going. And arguably, I think what I thought of was more interesting, frankly speaking. But anyways, maybe that's a bit too much for a side character like Namari. um. Anyways, what we actually saw again was her seeing if Fallen was one of the corpses that got brought in, and presumably, if she was, then I would assume that she would have paid for the resurrection if that were the case. Maybe that's a little too presumptive on my part, but that was I would assume, even based on, the information in that scene again being different than what I had initially expected, I would still assume, based on what we did end up seeing from that scene, that she probably wouldn't have bothered going there if she didn't plan to kind of follow through on what would have been like a possible action she could have taken if things had been as she expected, for Fallen to have died and then been brought into the temple. So yeah. And now, in terms, I guess, of just kind of to briefly talk about what we saw of her, what it does say about her, and now that I've gotten all of my false assumptions out of the way, just if anybody thought that was an interesting little rant, I hope that somebody did. um, what did we actually learn about her then, based on again the things that did actually happen? Again, I think that between last episode and this episode, I don't think it's necessarily that she doesn't care about people. I think it's just that she is a bit distant, and in a way I think that she's more like Chilchuck than Chilchuck acts like he is, if that makes sense. Because again, Chilchuck, and I'm not going to get too into Chilchuck right now, just because I've talked about this, a handful of times before, but Chilchuck has kind of put up this front and presentation of being someone who, like, he's here because of professional pride. He's here because it's part of the job, right? And I don't think that's really how he is. I think that's just how he says he is. But I think Namari might actually be the way that Chilchuck says that he is. I think that her connections, while she does legitimately, I think that while she does legitimately care for the people she adventures with, I think that it is a very professional relationship to her, which again, I don't think that it being a professional relationship means that, the the care and consideration is fake. I don't think that is necessarily the case. But it is very different than, for example, the way that Marcel is like obviously obviously very personal with the way that she views her relationships with these people, right? And so I think that that I think that understanding this about Namari does just kind of make it a little bit easier to understand who she is as a person and why maybe she says and does the things that we see her saying and doing, because it's not that she, it's not that she's insulting Louses and Senshi's weapons because she's like some arrogant, it's not like she's condescending to him, right? It's not like she's trying to feel superior. It's not like she's trying to show off like how much she knows and like how much she has standards for her weapons over other people. It is very much like the expression of like, how sometimes people say that like if so and so cares, then they have a funny way of showing it. I think that's Namari. I think I maybe this is maybe I'm jumping to conclusions a bit early because again we haven't honestly seen a super lot of her, but what we have seen, I feel like Namari is kind of very much a like she does care, but she has a funny way of showing it. Like she's kind of bossy, she's kind of standoffish, she's kind of very she's know it all isn't entirely accurate, but she's very much like she very much believes that her opinion and perspective on things it like should be valued and should be like a significant factor in people making the decisions that they make, right? Again, she tells Laos like you should be using a weapon like this. And it's not like some kind of like weird gloating. It's like I know weapons, right? It's basically her being like, I know weapons, I care about you. Let me use the knowledge that I have to help you in a way that you might not be able to help yourself and that other people might not be able to help you, at least not to the extent that I can. Like, this is what you need to do. You need to get a sword from the market. You need to get a sword that is made by a dwarf. You need to get a sword where the blacksmith is a dwarf who like knows what they're doing. That is what you need to be using as you adventure in the dungeon, because that is how you are effective as a fighter. That is how you are going to keep yourself and your allies safe, right? And again, similar with Senshi, she like called out how like, his weapon like that's not going to cut a dragon. And yeah, so there's just that's kind of just like the I think that the added little bit that we saw from her showing that she again had that consideration, had the thought to like go check the temple for Fallon's corpse. I think that that was enough for me to then feel more confident in kind of making and kind of like forming this opinion and perception of her. So yeah, that's again though we haven't seen a ton from her. I think that this show the show is interesting in the sense that our cast started out very small, but the way that they are expanding the cast, something about it is interesting. Because I think that they are trying to introduce characters in a slow way, but also having a level of consistency and with a level of exploration to their characters where I think that by the time we get to, we're episode 10 now, once we get several episodes further into the series and or by the end of the season, I think that it's going to be the case that there's going to be a fairly large cast of characters and they're all going to feel like actual fleshed out characters and not just kind of like very basic, like bare bones, two-dimensional side characters like you get in a lot of shows, right? And the reason I say that this is interesting is because, again, I feel like a lot of series, I feel like it's fair to say that a lot of shows fall into more or less two categories. which is either ensemble casts, where you more or less start with a pretty big cast, and then the show kind of like has to juggle a bunch of juggle a bunch of things, trying to explore as many of these different characters as deeply as they can, so that like again the ensemble cast can do what it's meant to do, which is bring to the series the the offerings of having many different characters that are able to carry episodes or carry scenes and have these kind of in-depth interactions with each other. And to be clear, ensemble casts are hard to execute on well, in my opinion. Which is why you more often see shows where you have a main character, or two or three, maybe four main characters, and then a bunch of side and supporting characters, right? And those side and supporting characters, they may have their moments, they may have awesome scenes, they may have like certain other members of the cast, like especially of the main characters, who they have great chemistry with, but they're never really like the main focus, right? That's not their job. They're not meant to be the main focus. They are meant to be side characters. They are meant to be supporting characters. And the focus is supposed to be on those main characters, whether it's one person, two people, whether it's three, maybe four characters, hell, maybe even a group of like five characters, but that's kind of pushing it, a core of like five main characters in a show. Most series just don't really do that. And again, I feel like the way that most shows operate is that whether they have, their core couple of main characters, or they're trying to go for an ensemble cast, I feel like they kind of set out with what they're doing more or less from the beginning. You might have to like slow start a little bit in some cases, but for the most part, like, which of these two routes, assuming it's going to go one of those two routes, which is again kind of how shows typically function, is using one of these two methods. They need to, like, they not need to, but they generally start out with the audience knowing like which of these things it's going to be for the most part, right? And so Dungeon Meshi just feels a little different to me, because it feels kind of like it started with the main characters being like, oh, okay, we've got Laos, we've got Chilchuk, Senshi, we've got Marcial, and we're gonna have like, a couple of people later, probably, maybe, but they're not gonna necessarily be as core as this group is. However, we're trying to rescue Fallen. We're slowly getting flashbacks to learn piece by piece a bit more about her. Presumably she's gonna become an actual character later. We are getting introduced to characters like Namari, who were part of the character story, even if we, the audience, didn't see it prior to the dragon encounter in episode 1. Like, we're seeing these characters who were part of the characters' lives previously, coming back into and re-interacting with them, with Namari, and ostensibly Shiro soon. Maybe not, though. Maybe not. I thought that Shiro was going to show up this episode or the next episode, but now that we didn't see him this episode, and we are seemingly going to get right into, maybe not right into it, but we're seemingly going to have the dragon fight next episode. Like, maybe we're not going to see Shiro for a little while. Maybe I was incorrect in that prediction, but that's whatever. I don't really care about that. We're getting characters like Kaburu, who again, he just kind of like, it feels like the show started kind of presenting itself as doing one thing, and it's kind of trying to slowly but consistently, with again these scenes with these other characters, it seems like it is trying to build us up into transitioning into an ensemble cast. And I just think that's really cool. I think that's really interesting. I think that is, and at the moment, it's hard to say with too much confidence right now, but at the moment, I would say that I feel like they're doing a decent job of it. If we get, again, to a point several episodes from now or by the end of the season where we do in fact end up having an ensemble cast, and most of the characters are like, they are full characters in and of themselves. They're not just like these side characters who it's like, oh, who are you? I don't even remember like who you are, what your deal is, anything like that. If we get like these like actual developed characters and like and again like a number of them by the end of the season or even just further into the season, like that is very impressive. That would be very impressive. I think that would be an incredible feat of storytelling, frankly. And the reason that even though I'm not confident enough to yet say like, oh, this is definitely going to happen, but I can say like I think they're doing it decently thus far. Even as I'm like watching it happen, even as I'm still like in the middle of the process, I think they're the reason that I'm like at least willing to say that much even is just because there have been like so many things with this show so far where I've been impressed and I feel like they are doing, you know, certain things really well. And I mean, this show is again, even though this episode, as I kind of said, it felt a little weird. And overall, if we're talking like pure entertainment value, pure enjoyment from the episode, this is like not gonna be one of my top episodes necessarily. Um, it's still just the case that like the show overall thus far has just I think been really good. It's been a show that I have really enjoyed watching, and I think that it's I don't want to speak too preemptively, but if it continues at its current pace in terms of like the quality of the characters, the quality of the storytelling, the quality of like the direction of the narrative, and also continues to just be damn funny a lot of the times, like it's very possible that this show could work its way like rather handedly into like my top 10 anime, for instance. And that might not sound like much of a commendation saying like top 10 anime, but let me just be very clear. I've watched a lot of anime. I've watched a lot of anime and I've seen some really good anime. So yeah, with all that being said, oh my god, an hour? Someone needs to shut me up. Okay, I think we're gonna call it there. I think we're gonna call it there. Oh dear. And here I was wanting to not speak for as long this video as I did for my most recent free run video, and I thought that was gonna be easy to do. Oops. Remember to like the video. Remember to comment on the video. Please, by all means, engage with me on some of any of the nonsense that I just spent the last 30, 40 minutes talking about. You've already watched the video all the way through. Thank you for that. If you've watched this far into this particular video and you haven't subscribed yet, I guess do that as well. Remember to check out other videos on the channel. Currently, the other long-running series is free run. Things are going to be changing a little bit. You'll see that shortly. Some other fun things happening shortly that I hope people enjoy as well. But yeah, with all that being said, thank you so much for watching, and until I see you in the next one, take care. Bye-bye.